abdominal roll, they're somewhat non-specific as opposed to being very like detail-oriented in some respects. But so everything that's up on the board there, for the most part, will also be on the test, except the endonasal technique, which we'll do at the end of the class. I'm not going to ask you to demonstrate that practically, but there will be questions about it possibly on the practical, the written part. So for the abdominal roll, you want to be able to again go from the inferior costal margins to the pelvic bowl. So I'm going to use the heels of my palm and kind of push away and use my fingers and pull towards myself. So this is just kind of moving around the abdominal contents somewhat, pretty generally. So again, for people who have indigestion, constipation, some type of abdominal disturbance, this is just helpful in general. The other technique, which does have a little bit more specificity to it, but is also part of the abdominal roll, is I'm going to use my fingers kind of on top of each other like this, starting kind of in the sigmoid region, in a clockwise direction, kind of dig and then push down. What I'm doing is I'm pushing the colonic contents out in front of me. It's kind of like when you're standing, to leave the door, and there's a line of 50 people. Who goes out the door first? The person next to the door, right? Because if the person that's in the back tries to do that, you get pushed up and you get like a big compression thing. So basically what I'm doing is I'm just pushing poop in front of me to kind of clear that stuff out. So just again making a little circle and pushing, little circle and push, little circle and push, and starting at the sigmoid. So it's just kind of like this. This is also very helpful if the patients had an evacuation either of their bowels or their. And then when I get to the transverse, their bladder before you work on their bellies. And then kind of going across the transverse colon. When I get to the hepatic flexure, I kind of just turn my body around this way. And then just kind of, then I'm still turning but lifting. And again, the idea is I'm just moving stuff around and out. So this helps particularly, and this is a little bit more specific for like constipation, because you're kind of moving stuff through. And sometimes, you guys have done abdominal exam stuff already. You have some understanding about that. Obviously, you do light first, then deep, and so on and so forth. And you're palpating, feeling, that's peeling, for, enlarged organs or other kind of things. So you can also sometimes get down in here and feel if there might be a full descending colon. It's like, why? You got a lot of, have you been to the bathroom recently? No, I'm kind of constipated. Sometimes you can feel that. When you get a little bit closer to the spine, where you might be able to feel the psoas, so understanding the anatomy of what you're feeling underneath there. Okay, so those are both abdominal rolls. So in the lab practical, you can show one or the other in relationship to that. Okay, so again, there's somewhat for non-specific reasons to help with gastric disturbance or GI stuff like that. Okay, so the next one is the adhesion release technique. Also, practically speaking, in a clinical scenario, these are more facilitated if they're done on skin than over shirts and clothing and things like that. So here we go. So with the adhesion release technique, I'm going to use my non-dominant hand and then place it to anchor the skin. My other hand is going to come in kind of like the claw. And then it's going to go right next to my thumb. And then it's going to radially deviate to myself like this. So like this, and then I'm just going to... And then when I make the next move, I just reposition. So I don't come out here, far away and do that. And I also don't just go over the surface of the skin. I have to get my anchor and then take my slack. So the idea is that you're breaking up adhesions. Now, one of the ways that sometimes you can observe, if a patient has a scar, post like a prior surgery, so you can just sometimes pull the skin. You can see how all of Dr. McAllister's skin's kind of coming towards me. Like if he had an adhesion here, if I pull, you see how that area of skin doesn't come towards me? That's another way that in clinically you can observe that there might be an adhesion. Again, these are more for superficial things. If you want to get a deeper one, you just add a little bit more pressure to make that contact happen. And you can see right here where I did that, there's a histamine reaction. That, generally speaking, is a good sign because you know that there's vitality in the tissues to kind of respond. Because anytime under pressure, like that, the the skin will release histamine. Okay, so I don't, generally speaking, do the abdominal release technique over the entire abdomen. You know, I locate a location or a region that I do it over. When I do the hiatal hernia technique, you know, I'm going to start out doing it kind of in the epigastric area to kind of loosen up those tissues as well. Sometimes in a reflex context, if you increase the circulation superficially, you're going to increase the circulation, you know, deeper. It's one of those reflex things. Okay, so again, anchor, hand here, and then just pull kind of towards myself. All right. So once you get facilitated, you can do this kind of in a more rapid kind of context. Okay. Now, sometimes if you see a person with a scar, this is additional information. This is not going to be on the test. You can sometimes pick up this tissue that the scar is in and just kind of lift it up like this to stretch it. Sometimes you can get over the scar and pushing it like that, like a jackhammer. And then sometimes you can just take the scar and do skin rolling. And that breaks up mechanically the fibrous reactions that are the adhesions.
If you're going to do it on the other side, is it okay that you're coming towards yourself, or does it always have to be going towards midline?
No, I'm still going towards myself.
Okay.
I'm just using radial deviation,
okay,
no matter where I am.
Okay.
And just as another point, you can also use injection therapies for scar therapy. This is where you inject, usually it's a local anesthetic. You know, you can use lidocaine or one of the canes. You can use procaine. You might want to consider putting something else in it if you want. You can just inject saline. So mechanically speaking, you're just injecting fluid into the fibers of the adhesion or the scar, and then it swells up, right, and it just breaks them. It's like, you know, if you ever had a balloon, you know, you got water in it, and then the water comes out, you know, and then the balloon's all kind of like crumpled up together. When you kind of blow it in there, and this, you know, just kind of, and then those folded over parts just kind of separate. So the tissues are kind of like that. They're adhesed. And so when you put mechanically fluid in there and just kind of blow it up, those tissues release. Yeah.
Why would you use procaine or lidocaine?
They're local anesthetics, so it numbs it. Sticking a needle in somebody and pushing stuff in there doesn't feel good.
Oh,
So a local anesthetic makes it so that it anesthetizes the tissues. And then sometimes you do that and then you go through, so the skin becomes anesthetized, so all the times you're poking them with the needle, they can't feel it. Until later on when it wears out, then you kind of like, feel all that. So that's the adhesion release technique. And that includes, you know, aspects of releasing scars and things like that. So sometimes if a person has had pelvic inflammatory disease, peritonitis, other kinds of things, there can be, you know, adhesions that exist in the peritoneum. And so these sometimes are ways to kind of break them up. All right, so the liver pump, gallbladder pump, and spleen pump. You know, I talked about this in the class. These are just pump mechanisms that help to facilitate circulation to and through organs. So obviously the liver is one of the most important detoxification organs, so people who just feel kind of like congested, you know, you can work it out to kind of create an increased flow. So you want to stand opposite the organ. And I'll do the one over here as well. I know there's not too many people over here to see what I'm doing over here. So maybe I'll just start out with the spleen pump. There's more people over here. And the technique is pretty much the same from one side to the other. So this hand comes around and it comes underneath so that my palm is like underneath on his rib cage. So again, this is like significantly flexed, right? And then I can identify his inferior rib cage. Then I'm going to place my forearm on it. Now, without worrying about the other hand at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop my humerus down like this, and you can see how that's putting compression on the inferior aspect of the rib cage. Sometimes I've seen students do this. It's not that. It's underneath here. So it's helpful if your antecubital fossa is kind of facing up a little bit to make that drop. Because if you're kind of like this, you just can't make it happen. And now, for the spleen, you can visualize, you know, where is the spleen? You know, it's kind of hard because it's in there somewhere, right? But it's pretty much, if I just took my fingers and went straight like that, I'd probably get to the spleen, right? So partly it's knowing your anatomy. So this other hand's going to come in using my fingers. Now, so take a nice deep breath in as he exhales. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I might stop and have him take another deep breath and kind of repeat that several times. Now, if you've got longer nails, this is probably not going to be very comfortable for the patient. You know, you're going to do the Wolverine on them. So an alternate sometimes is just to bend and then use your pips. So you can get the same kind of context with that. I find it just easier to do this because I have a little bit more strength for that, okay? So, actually, Heath, let me just have you put your head down here. So for the liver, so that was the spleen pump. So you, again, like I said, you stand opposite the organ. So for the liver pump, same kind of thing. It's your cephalid hand that's going to make contact with the inferior aspect of your rib cage. And again, you can see how my hand comes in like this, ulnar deviated. Not ulnar deviated, excuse me, flexed. Now the liver is a larger organ. Now I know that you guys learned in Clipper, probably you palpate it out or percuss it out, see kind of where it is. Again, if you have an enlarged organ, you want to be a little bit more probably careful about the amount of pressure that you're going to apply. But I don't think you're going to do any of these pumps and like pop the capsule. So I think you're safe. But at the same time, it still might be uncomfortable, so you still need to kind of honor patient's tolerance for pressure. But because the liver is a larger organ, I'm going to use the knife edge contact of my radial aspect of my index finger here like this. And my thumb just kind of comes up and rests here. So when I make my contact, I'm not just laying flat on the abdomen and pushing down to the table. I'm kind of coming in, the same thing with the spleen pump, at like an angle, 45 or a 60-degree angle, into the liver, right? And so this other hand is doing the same thing. Take a deep breath in, blow it on out. And if a person has really tight abs, you can bring their legs up. This relaxes the musculature a little bit, okay? So that's the liver pump. The gallbladder pump, everything is pretty much the same, except the gallbladder is a smaller organ. So you want to be more specific, and typically it tends to be a little bit lateral to the xiphoid here. So I'm going to come in, kind of get with my fingers like this, and or if I have nails, I can use my pips. Okay, breath in, out. So those are the basic mechanics of it. So again, when you have a patient who might have cholecystitis or some type of gallbladder issue, or maybe they want to do like a gallbladder flush, or they again have a congested liver because they're constipated, as we talked about in the class, stress, post-viral or flu-iac kind of just feel punk, indigestive stuff, all that stuff, can be benefited, by getting stuff through the organs. There was an article, I didn't